A number of people I have spoken to have described as, well, they say outrageous, and this again, that another study on the young black male is in the works, when a report is yet forthcoming on such a study commissioned by former Premier Alex Scott. In fact, an elderly lady said, why bring someone here to tell us what we already know? How do you respond to that?
Well, you know, I've made statements like that in the past myself, but I've come to understand that when you are formulating government policy that's going to affect the lives of people unseen, you have to have data, and you have to have a measuring stick by which you can check your performance. The initial study that was done was what I can call a preliminary study. And in fact, I think had it been a complete study, my predecessor would have released it.
Could you just explain a little bit more when you say a complete study?
Yeah, in other words, the information for this study will come from the census, but there are techniques and methods by which trained people who have doctorates in studies, in social studies, who can take that data and extrapolate it into meaningful recommendations. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't know the problems in Bermuda. That's why we're working. We're not just sitting on our hands until the study is finished. That's for somebody else's government. This government has already begun. We have the Mirrors program in place. We have the alternatives to incarceration in place. These things are ongoing. The hustle truck is in place. We do these things, but we work from both ends. It doesn't make sense to sit and do a study while Rome is burning, so to speak. And I understand the impatience of people. In fact, impatience is something I recognize very quickly.
Yes, well.
And so I think it's important for people to know that we are not waiting for a study that's going to sit on the shelf. We need this information because although we believe we know, there are certain things that will be revealed through the numbers that we have not yet agreed upon.
Time will not permit us to touch on every issue of the day. However, housing, crime, illegal drugs, and what appears to be, this could be something, a crumbling social infrastructure. That might not sound real nice. These things should be at the top of the table, most people feel. How do you think we can achieve a turnaround in these areas of real concern with discipline missing from our homes and schools?
Well, let me say that the first thing we do know is that if we don't face these issues, we cannot fix them. And so we face the issue of education, and we're in the process of fixing. We face the issue of housing, and I'm sure that anyone who has any knowledge at all about the work that Colonel Birch is doing with respect to housing can see now that all of the considerations and planning that went into this is now manifesting itself in concrete. People can see the housing that that Colonel Birch's ministry has caused to come about. We're confronting all these issues. The Mirrors program is directed right at the social dysfunction among people between the ages of 15 and 18. That's real. In the schools, we know that we have to make fundamental structural changes, and those things are in process right now.
Yeah. One of the things since we're still talking about schools, and I mentioned discipline, one of the things that I've personally observed, and it concerns, I guess it concerns me and other people as well, is students, their behavior, their manner and respect to the uniforms, and their inability to even express themselves. You just said they're addressing this educational system. I've been alarmed at the amount of students coming from many of the prominent high schools who can hardly get out a sentence properly.
That's part of the failure. That's evidence of the failure that we've talked about. Years of neglect, years of a reluctance to confront what we knew was there. We've had the system studied, but we did not take on the awesome challenge of turning it upside down and inside out. And that is what you have to do. You know, some people want the beauty of the ocean, as they say, without the roar of the mighty waves.
Yeah.
You know, they want the fruit from the tree, Frederick Douglass said, without plowing up the ground. You cannot have great results without work and sometimes a certain degree of discomfort.
Yeah. You mentioned plowing up the ground. I would imagine that that would entail a look at the effect that the illegal drug problem is having on young people, even in the school setting. There seems to be an unknown factor here as to the extent of that, and also outside influences that you hear people talk about. It's a different world today almost, and it's extremely challenging. And I wondered, how long do you think it will be, if possible, that they'll see some real turnaround in facing these problems?
In politics and in social change, the turnaround doesn't come on a Monday morning. You don't wake up and say, oh, this problem has now been solved. There are many Bermudians committed to the detection and treatment of drug and other substance abuse as we speak. There are people hard at work, without whose work the situation would be worse. So we have those people working, and we keep supporting their work. In the meantime, we have some creative additions to our law enforcement that Bermuda will hear about in the near future.
Well, that sounds good, because I think it was a little bit disturbing to a lot of people to hear a high-ranking police officer say, we have an idea who the big boys are, but we just simply can't get to them.
Right. I think they need help, and we're going to provide that assistance.
So you think we perhaps somewhere down the line will crack that, and
I believe we will.
Okay. Now, trust is a key element in any decent society. While we are not able to discuss the Bermuda Housing Corporation dilemma as a result of current legal proceedings, I wonder if I could ask you if legislation is in place or going to be in place to prevent an act involving the people's purse from being simply called unethical when proper legislation would make it a crime.
Well, all I'll say about that is that a certain amount of politicking, scaremongering, has been done with respect to this issue. This matter was examined by numerous investigative bodies, and the comment that you referred to was one that was made by the Director of Public Prosecutions. He made no specific comment. He said that if the laws were different, maybe there would be certain people. He never said who.
Yeah, he just said that, I think the point was that if there was some legislation, it would have resulted in some prosecutorial action, but the legislation did not exist.
Well, I'll tell you what.
This is the point that most of the people...
Modernization of legislation is something that we will not hesitate to do. Protecting the public purse is important. The people's money is sacred. And any government has the responsibility of modernizing legislation, refining legislation, amending legislation, so as to make sure that the public purse is protected. Now remember, this is legislation that we found in place, that had been in place for many, many, many years. And some of the people who are calling for rapid reform had the opportunity to do it for many years and didn't bother.